Hey everybody, thanks for all the feedback and the great questions coming out of this past weekend's message about God placing voices in our life, His voice, and then people to help us process that. So it just brought me back to think we should just be reminded of the most basic definition of a truly spiritual life. I don't mean someone who lives a good Christian life or a clean life or goes to church. I'm talking about what does it mean to live the kind of life where you experience God's voice and His interaction every day. Some people call this like living in a thin place between heaven and earth, and you're aware of God's presence. And I've found it's been helpful to teach people how to notice that so that you don't just go through an earthly existence, but you go through a spiritual one. So I gave you 3 images this weekend. I want to give you a couple more examples because that seemed to be what people were fascinated about. I call them speed bumps, brick walls, and mirrors. And let me give you some quick examples. As you're going through your day, God will stop and get your attention. And some of them are just speed bumps. It's just like, oh, I felt it, right? I felt it. And I could just move on and, not make any changes at all. But maybe I should notice that I felt something. And I think that can happen all throughout your day with all kinds of experiences. And if you feel a little bump, you should think, oh, maybe God is trying to prompt me. The most common way this works for me is He places names and faces in my mind. I could be sitting working at my desk, I could be driving down the road, I could be in any kind of setting, and I always try to think, if He placed a name or a face or a story in my mind, I should think, God put that there, and I should touch base with somebody and tell them, I think God prompted me to reach out. And so I do. I give them a call, I shoot them a text, maybe I give them a handwritten note. And it's not every time that something dramatic happens out of that, but I can't tell you how many times. You should do this. When a name comes to mind, think, I'm just going to shoot him a text, tell him I care about him, I'm pulling for him, ask him a question, follow up on a conversation. It might be an old college friend that randomly came into your mind, or it might be from the conversation you had earlier that morning, but that's like a speed bump, and you can move past it, but don't. Second thing are brick walls. Of course, these are different than speed bumps. This is like I got smacked in the face. It definitely has me sitting up in bed. But the difference is lots of people sit up in bed or get whacked over the head, and they never stop to think, maybe God is trying to get my attention, and I should process this in a way that thinks, what is He saying to me, and how should I respond? So, this can happen in lots of ways. If your company's going through downsizing, you hear that, or they're moving their headquarters, or you lost your job, that's a brick wall. If you get a diagnosis, or somebody you love gets a diagnosis that's tragic, like that should have your attention. I know for me, I think this happens a lot if I get into an argument with someone. My wife's awesome. We do argue from time to time. And most of the time after an argument, it's our instinct to review the argument and think, how could I have won? Or, something horrible like that. And I think, I should treat that as a brick wall and say, God, what were you trying to say to me through that? What do you need to say to me about my pride, about the gap in our understanding and communication? What are you saying to me about how I should handle that next in the relationship? But whenever you hit a brick wall, like something really hits you, stop and process it spiritually. The third thing is the idea of this mirror. And this is really when something causes you to be a little introspective. Now, some of you by nature are more introspective than others, but I want you to pay attention throughout a day or a week to those times when you think, I just did that. What does that say about me, right? And maybe, this can happen in lots of ways. You leave a really generous tip, you might say, what does that say about me? You leave no tip, what does that say about me? Here's my example. Last week, I was driving and coming up kind of in a line of cars to a 4-way stop, and when it was my turn to go, there was a car from the other side that just blew through and followed the car right in front of them, and they almost hit me. I laid on the horn to honk at them, and they were very upset. I was very upset, and it was just enough that day to make me step back and say, Greg, why'd you lay on the horn like that? Could I justify it? I totally could justify it. In fact, I'd kind of like to all of you right now. But the truth is, I'm not usually a person who lays on the horn, and so I have to step back and say, God, why did I do that? What's that say about me? What should I be thinking about? Why am I more impatient right now? You have my attention, God. Lead me to help me understand what you're trying to teach me. So I hope that you have spiritual experiences every day where you notice God prompting you and interacting you, and you live with your antenna up and then process it to say, God, what are you saying and how should I respond? Hope that's helpful.